Good evening. Just kidding. Ryan Bijan here. I say this with the deepest regret. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I'm sure you guys' presentations are awesome. I wish I could be there, but I am with you in spirit. In 1945, the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki opened up the eyes of the world. True horror wasn't found in the distant, dusty old castles of Transylvania. Horror was happening every day in the news. Now, audiences were looking towards the future rather than the past to get their chills.
Oh, no. Please don't wear that.
What's the matter?
I know you'll think I'm crazy, but in a half an hour, the moon will rise, and I'll turn into a wolf.
You and 20 million other guys.
Listen, I might tear you limb from limb.
The classic icons of Universal Studios had since morphed from figures of horror to figures of light comedy, being featured in a series of films starring Abbott and Costello, such as Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and even Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. The classic icons of horror were dead. But this would leave it open for one small British production company to resurrect them in full force.
Perhaps you had better start from the beginning.
Hammer Film Productions was first founded in 1934 by producer William Hines, aka Will Hammer, and his partner, cinema owner Enrique Carreras. For the duration of the 1930s, 40s, and most of the 1950s, Hammer was known for their low-budget black and white films. These were gangster movies, comedies, adventure films, you name it. Hammer was responsible for a wide variety of different genres. But in 1957, that would change forever.
Where did it all begin?
In 1956, Hammer had received a screenplay called The Curse of Frankenstein. Originally, this was planned to be a very low-budget production like the rest of their output, shot in black and white and on a very tight schedule. However, when Hammer realized they weren't allowed to use Universal's famous makeup designed by Jack Pierce featuring the flat-topped monster with the bolts in his neck, they decided to take the film in a different direction. Starting from scratch, The Curse of Frankenstein would be a full Technicolor reboot. For the first time, The Curse of Frankenstein brought Hammer's core working team together. Directed by Terence Fisher from a script by production designer turned screenwriter Jimmy Sangster, the film starred veteran TV actor Peter Cushing as the Baron Victor von Frankenstein and 6'5" Christopher Lee as the Frankenstein monster. It is not the monster, but rather Victor Frankenstein, which is the focus of the story. Victor is the true villain of the piece, being a megalomaniacal sociopath from the beginning, who genuinely wants to help mankind by bringing life back to the dead and creating his own master race. Victor's friends don't quite agree with him, and all hell breaks loose when the monster is finally created. The film, shot in glorious Technicolor with its lush red blood and appropriate 19th century cleavage, pushed the film to the top and became an immediate hit.
But I have escaped the guillotine, and I shall avenge the death of my creation.
Of course, Hammer wasn't ready to rest on their laurels. Immediately set in production was A Revenge of Frankenstein and a follow-up. 1958's Dracula, which was released in the United States as Horror of Dracula, reteamed director Terence Fisher with Peter Cushing as Abraham Van Helsing, the ever-vigilant vampire hunter, and Christopher Lee in his star-making role as Count Dracula. Horror of Dracula pushed the boundaries of sex and violence in 1958, showing a Dracula that was both menacing and animalistic, as well as seductive to the opposite sex.
You would do well to remember the ancient saying, "He who robs the graves of Egypt dies."
Hammer Studios had another hit on their hands and decided to follow it up with a remake of The Mummy. Despite its title, 1959's The Mummy owes more to the 1940 film The Mummy's Hand rather than the Boris Karloff original. In The Mummy, Peter Cushing, once again as the hero, John Banning, archaeologist, unlocks Christopher Lee, once again, the monster, as Karis from his long slumber in a tomb in the African jungle. Christopher Lee's fierce and aggressive movements are a far cry from the shambling monster created by Lon Chaney Jr. in Universal's series of Mummy films. The Curse of Frankenstein, The Horror of Dracula, and The Mummy became Hammer's iconic trinity of terror. all three spinning off very successful film series of their own.
Leo!
1961 saw the release of Curse of the Werewolf, starring Oliver Reed in his first role as a leading man. Unlike its predecessors, the film wasn't a huge success, and ended up being Hammer's sole contribution to the werewolf genre. In 1962, Hammer would resurrect another Universal Studios classic with The Phantom of the Opera. Once again directed by Terence Fisher, Phantom stars Herbert Lom as Professor Petrie, the disfigured protagonist, and Heather Sears as Christine. In a far cry from previous incarnations and the original Gaston Leroux novel, the 1962 film is the first time the Phantom is the hero of the story. This time, Professor Petrie is a wrong composer who has his music stolen by an evil music publisher played by Michael Goff.
You're a delicious student. I'm going to enjoy teaching.
Michael Goff had previously played the heroic Arthur Holmwood in Horror of Dracula, but is best remembered by today's audiences as Alfred in the 1989 Batman film.
Take off that ridiculous mask when you speak to me. Do you hear me? Take it off!
The film's gentler approach to the character was actually owed to the fact that Cary Grant, of all people, wanted to star in a Hammer horror film just to do something different. It's believed the role of Harry Hunter, the Raoul character in the film, was written for Cary Grant, but he had dropped out at the last minute. Unfortunately, Phantom was not a huge success for Hammer Films, and didn't really make as much money as their Dracula or Frankenstein series. So like Curse of the Werewolf, it was the sole Hammer film for that particular character.
You think that I have not suffered?
And in this house, the most dire, horrible events took place.
1960 saw the release of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, a film that would change the face of horror forever. Once again, the times were a-changing, and the 1960s would see a variety of successes and failures for Hammer Film Productions. For more on that, I want to turn it over to my main man, David Johnson.